Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? The show that brings you answers to many of the questions that you may have, but with no one to ask. Do You Ever Wonder is hosted by Mike Haltman, CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, who, like you, has always been deeply curious about a wide variety of topics. Each week, Mike will be speaking with guests who are leaders in their field and who have inspirational stories to tell. So now, sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Haltman, and it is a pleasure to have someone with us. Not only is he a Long Island guy, which is a bonus to begin with, but he's a serial entrepreneur. He's a best-selling author. He's a keynote speaker, and he's also a Brooklyn guy. You grew up in Brooklyn, correct? Please meet Dave Kerpen.
Thanks for having me. And yes, Sunset Park, Brooklyn, born and raised.
Nice. You know what? I don't go to Brooklyn a lot. I was there yesterday, but I did do the Coney Island polar bear plunge, and that was, that's quite the part of Brooklyn. So,
Awesome. I was married in Coney Island.
were you really? Hopefully at Nathan's.
Right next door at that Keyspan Park where the Brooklyn Cyclones play.
Oh, no kidding. Well, I wanted to get to that, but I know, so typically we run 30, 40 minutes. I know we have a drop dead time. We only have about 20 minutes. So the key thing that I'd really like to cover that I think people are really interested in, you are a serial entrepreneur, meaning that in the 2000s you were a math teacher. And from being a math teacher, while you were being a math teacher, I believe you started Likeable Local. Is that the way things worked?
We started our first company while I was a math teacher. It's called the K-Buzz. It became Likeable Media, and Likeable Local was the second company I started, and we've gone on to start a number of companies since then. And don't worry about the short time, because as a New Yorker, I can talk super fast. So I can get in 30, 40 minutes of content in 20 minutes, no problem.
I can see that. Well, you know what? You grew up in Brooklyn. You're a Long Island guy. We talk fast. What did the entrepreneurial path look like? Were you always someone interested in being a business owner and an entrepreneur?
I always enjoyed sales, and I always enjoyed creating something out of nothing, but I wasn't sure I was going to be an entrepreneur. You mentioned I taught. I studied teaching at school, but while I was in school, I had my first entrepreneurial endeavor. I was a ballpark vendor at Fenway Park and the Boston Garden, and ballpark vendors are only paid based on how much they sell and tips. So it's commission driven. So it's very entrepreneurial, even though you're working for a food service company. And I ended up developing a shtick as the Crunch and Munch guy and selling quite a bit of Crunch and Munch and making quite a bit of money while I was in school. And that was really my first foray into entrepreneurship. And then several years later, our wedding that I mentioned, my wife and I wanted to get married, but we didn't have enough money to pay for the kind of large wedding we wanted. So we partnered with the Brooklyn Cyclones to create a baseball wedding themed Field of Dreams, and we sold sponsorships to the game in exchange for providing our wedding goods and services. 1-800-Flowers sponsored the flowers, Smirnoff sponsored the alcohol, David's Bridal sponsored the bridesmaids' gowns and wedding dress, and so on and so forth. We raised $100,000 for an amazing wedding. That was after the wedding, we generated so much press and attention for our wedding sponsors that a couple of those clients, namely 1-800-Flowers.com and Entenmann's, both of whom are based in Long Island, said, "Hey, what are you guys going to do next?" We couldn't get married again, so we started our first company, the marketing agency I mentioned. So that was really my foray into entrepreneurship.
That's great, and I know that in the ballparks there's a hierarchy. You don't get to sell beer. Forget about what age you are, but you have to start with the other stuff. So what was your shtick? I'm just curious.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's a seniority-based system. So you got to work for years to get the beer and the hot dogs. Those are the big selling products. So my first day on the job, I was literally the lowest man on the totem pole, and I got assigned Crunch and Munch, buttery toffee popcorn with peanuts. I sold 6 boxes, which is not a lot of Crunch and Munch, and I got paid the legal minimum of $10. And so I came back the second day determined to get people's attention, and so I developed like a shtick, singing, dancing, juggling boxes.
Nice.
I had no talent. The only talent I had was the courage to look like a fool in the greater service of getting people's attention and hopefully making people laugh a bit. And it worked very, very well.
You did that in Boston, which has its own there's risk involved with making an idiot out of yourself in front of Boston fans. No offense to Boston fans, but
Well, yeah, and I wasn't loved by everyone. A few notable haters were Bill Simmons, and Rick Pitino, Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe. There were a bunch of folks that did not like what I was doing, but I had lots and lots of fans as well. I ended up doing quite a bit of media. I was on the front page of the Boston Herald. I was on ESPN Sports Center. I really maxed out what you could do as a ballpark vendor, and I went from making $10, the legal minimum, that first night, to making over $1,000 a night for a few hours work as a college student at my peak. So I definitely turned it into a bit of a thing.
that's amazing. You know, I worked when I was younger than college. I worked at the Aqueduct Racetrack Flea Market, and we were at the Everything's a Dollar booth. And you know, we had a kitchen glove, so you know that was a time of Michael Jackson, so it became Michael Jackson's glove. You know, you had to create, you had to be very creative. But so the first company you started was internet based, and what was your expertise in doing that?
I had none. It was at the start. It was we called ourselves word of mouth marketing. So we had just had this ballpark wedding, and had generated a lot of press. It's to date the number one PR promotion that 1-800flowers.com has ever done. It was something like $60 million worth of earned media for a $6,000 flower bouquet. The beginning of the company was word of mouth marketing, guerrilla marketing offline. We actually did several baseball stadium sponsorship events. We did mall events. I had one of our early clients was the Green Acres Mall in Long Island, at the shops at Atlas Park in Queens, and we did grand openings for Staples and Stop and Shop and a bunch of retailers. And what happened was the end of our first year in business, Facebook opened up beyond college students, and one of my interns said, "Dave, you should really get on Facebook. I think now that it is more than just college students, I feel like you should be on there. It's going to be a good marketing tool." And I said, "Sure, set up a profile for me." Kathy, set up my first profile on Facebook, and I got into playing around, and I realized very, very quickly that, in fact, it would be a much better tool for marketing than giant baseball stadium events and the sponsorships and offline events that we had been doing. And so we pivoted towards our first the end of our first year in business, from offline to online marketing, and we learned as we went. And fortunately, we were one of the first movers in the space, and I ended up writing one of the first books in the space, and we built our expertise along the way, fortunately for us.
Now, what happened with Kathy? Did she become a co-owner of the company?
She did not. She went into nonprofit herself. She was
Okay.
passionate about other things, but she's wonderful, and I am all for equity partners. My latest venture, I started with Rob, who was a college student at the time, and when we sold that company, Likeable. When we sold it, we had created a equity plan for our employees and advisors, and I was delighted to write checks to many of our young employees that had helped us build the company.
That's fantastic. So, if you had to give any advice, so these days everyone comes out of college, they want to be billionaires, obviously, but they want to do something unique. They want to have a side hustle. They want to create a company. As an entrepreneur these days, you know, the I think the playing field has changed a little bit since when you started. So, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur, is tired of working for somebody, doesn't want, you know, to work to feather somebody else's nest, wants to create? You know, what's the advice besides hard work and whatever else it was that you did?
Yeah, start now. Don't wait. Don't wait. A lot of people are afraid, but we started, I tell the story of the wedding, but I was teaching at the time, and we built a business plan. We started working with various clients on different projects, and my wife and I decided we would need at least I think it was $10,000 of monthly recurring revenue per month, and at least 3 clients uh, to make the full jump and leave teaching. We had a young child at the time, and entrepreneurship is about risk, but it's about managing risk. It's about managing risk. And so, it's easy for me to say jump in, but I would say jump in while you're doing whatever you're doing and manage that risk carefully. I worked that summer of 2007 and got those 3 clients and got that 10K of revenue. And I left teaching and never looked back because we had the opportunity, because we had already built in the safety and security of knowing we would have $10,000 a month of revenue. So I think it's about jumping in and not waiting, but it's about doing it in a cautious way that makes sure that you're managing your risk carefully.
So the 3 clients that you got, the $10,000 of recurring revenue that you generated, what metrics did you show those clients? What did you sell those clients that got them to sign on and take a risk with you?
Well, we had 1-800-Flowers and Entenmann's, who I mentioned, and then we actually had a pretty unique partnership with um, uh, I'm a big fan of barter. So we had done barter with the wedding. We ended up partnering with the shops at Atlas Park, which is a mall in Queens, and we had a partnership with them that provided our office as part of the deal, our office in barter. So that was wonderful, and that took away the biggest expense that we would have in the business. Of course, now, so many years later, you really don't need an office for that much to start a business. So most people start a business, in their home. But those were the clients, and then the metrics were different depending on the client. But as I mentioned, in the beginning we were selling offline marketing, so more like creative marketing services,
Thank you.
word of mouth marketing, guerrilla marketing, event marketing.
So now you work with your wife. Had you always envisioned doing that? I work with my wife. I own a title insurance company. My wife and I started it together. There's great things about it. There can be some back and forth in terms of the ease with which it goes. How do you do it?
Yeah, well, I no longer currently work with my wife.
Okay.
We had a wonderful journey together, and we may work together again on businesses in the future. We certainly consult each other on each other's businesses. I meet with her every 2 weeks on business. We met just this morning. Um, and But along the way, to answer your question, we had a lot of challenges. Uh, but we learned the importance of communication, over communication, and boundaries and roles. Um, those are the two big ones. Those are the two big ones. Like making sure that we didn't bring our work life home and our home life to work, and being really strict about that, as well as being strict around roles and responsibilities, who does what, so that there were fair expectations on both sides.
I think that's important. Sometimes, so I'm business development, my wife is inside, but sometimes I feel she should be doing more business development. But to your point, she's good at what she does, and I'm hopefully good at what I do. But, you really do have to stay in your lane. That's 100% true. So you had done a something early on. It was called Free Therapy for Mets Fans, and you generated 120 million hits. And my question is, someone who tries to use social media as a marketing tool, what was it that clicked? What was it that made that go viral? Other
Yeah,
than
well, it's very hard to predict. It's very hard to predict virality. Very, very hard, if not impossible to predict virality. But I'm a diehard Mets fan, and I was working at the time as a interim CEO for a mental health startup, and the Mets had just lost a really miserable game. I think it was 25-4 a game to the Washington Nationals. And I just had an idea that night. I thought, you know what? We we should offer free therapy for Mets fans. And it will get, I think it'll get some attention. And so we posted it, we did a press release, and yeah, the next thing I knew, I mean, that's probably people that like me would call me a media magnet, and people that don't like me would call me a media whore. I've been very, very blessed with massive, massive media attention for many, many different things. Right. I mentioned the wedding and the Crunch Munch guy, and certainly, but this was the number one promotion I've ever done. It was crazy how viral that thing went. And again, hard to predict, except to say, think out of the box and be unafraid of the haters.
Right. No,
Have the courage. The two things I think that are in common with a lot of my media success is having courage to take chances and really thinking out of the box, destroying the box, right?
I was going to use that phrase in terms of thinking outside the box because, when you started, it was relatively early on, and it was easy to think outside the box. In an industry like mine that's a little more old and staid, thinking outside the box is a little bit different. I try to do that, and I'm not afraid to do that. But again, you had the media attention, you had the followers. You have 600,000 followers on LinkedIn. I don't know how many you had at the time, but those kinds of metrics definitely make it a little bit easier to get virality going, I would think. Would you agree with that?
Um, yes and no. I think there are countless examples of folks on TikTok, especially in the last year or two, that went viral having less than 100 followers. So I think yes, the larger an audience you have to start, the better. But it shouldn't lack of audience shouldn't keep people from thinking big and thinking outside of the box. There's definitely on TikTok and Instagram, which are the platforms of choice right here in 2024, the ideas matter more than the number of followers.
So, and hashtags, I assume, or just the idea?
Just the idea.
Just the idea. So we're running out of time. I did want to touch base with you on a few other things, but one is VC. I know you invest in smaller startup companies, and
Yeah, we took some of the proceeds from our exit, and we created Kerpen Ventures, which invests in women-owned and people of color-owned businesses.
nice. I happen to be a woman-owned business if you're interested. But how do you locate? How do you vet those businesses?
We get deal flow from different investors, and folks reach out to us directly and pitch me.
Oh, that's great. And just as an aside, before we say goodbye, and hopefully I'll at some point in the future have you on again, but I also did have the CEO of 1-800-Flowers as a guest on this as well. He's a good guy.
Jim's a great guy. He's been a wonderful mentor to me over the years.
Absolutely. So with that, we're going to say goodbye. We're going to listen to a little bit of music, and then again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for listening to Do You Ever Wonder? And we hope that you enjoyed the show. Next week, we will have another terrific guest telling their story. And if there are any specific topics you'd like to hear more about, please don't hesitate to let us know. Our curiosity, like yours, knows no bounds. Please subscribe and like and share this episode on your social media. See you next week.